I'm going to call the meeting to order at 10 o'clock. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. So if I could have a motion.
Moved.
I'll move.
Oh, okay, thank you, Jean.
Okay, I popped up earlier, but maybe you didn't hear me.
Oh, okay, then I'll take that as well. Thanks, Eric. And Thomas, can you call the vote, please?
Certainly. Councillor Bratney,
Yes.
Eric Cowell,
Yes.
Councillor Tully,
Yes.
Chair Defoe.
Yes.
Motion carries by 4.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is the disclosure of interest. And I'm not quite sure, Thomas, what I do with this one. Does everyone just say they don't have anything, or?
So you would ask for any disclosures of interest with respect to any of the items on the agenda. At this point in time, if any members have an interest they would like to disclose, they would announce it for recording purposes. If you do not hear or see any, then you would simply say hearing, seeing none, and move on to the next item.
Okay. I'm not going to repeat all that. So hearing and seeing none, we will move on to the next item, which is the approval of the minutes from our July 8th, 2020 meeting. I'm assuming everybody has had a chance to review those minutes.
Yes. Yes, and I'll move them.
Thank you, Eric.
Welcome.
I'll second them.
Thanks, Ken. Thomas, can you please call the vote?
Certainly. Eric Cowell,
Yes.
Councillor Tully,
Yes.
Councillor Bratney,
Yes.
Chair Defoe.
Yes.
Motion carries by 4.
Okay, now we're at the report stage. So I am going to ask Jeff to walk us through the reports. We don't need to go line by line, I don't believe.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. As I go through it, please, if anyone has any questions or comments at all, just step right in, and hopefully I can explain any issues for you. So this report, keep in mind, is for June to August, so the numbers are obviously reflecting that time period. So I'll start at the top. Public complaints. We're in good shape right now. We don't have any public complaints or internal complaints active and weaving through the system. Our secondary employment, we have 5 members currently. That number has been steady at 5 for several years now. So that represents any of our members who have an approved employment outside of the OPP. Just for example, we have a couple that are cabinet makers, very skilled in that. So within the OPP, you can't just, you're not allowed to just go start making money in a different area. So there's quite a process through our professional standards, and they have to approve that type of thing. In saying that, that number 5's been steady for quite a few years. Now, under our daily activity reporting hours, the number of cruiser patrol hours in this time period, 1,206. Foot patrol hours, 236. I like seeing that number. It's foot patrol is very important to me and very important to us, especially during the pandemic, to have that officer visibility out there. That would also reflect some with the waterfront issues that we've had through the summer. Crow River, Rainy Falls, Healy Falls. So on my direction, I wanted as much officer foot patrol as possible, specifically in that area, dealing with the crowds.
How many of those hours were your own?
Pardon me?
I say, how many of those hours were your own? I had heard that you had taken up a little bit of the slack.
I've always been a foot guy, Kathy, ever since the 90s. I enjoy it, and I great exercise too. So yeah,
Perfect.
I do that as much as I can. Not as much as I'd like, but as much as I can. Under our detachment initiatives, I won't go through that because we're talking about a few months here. We have quite a few media releases we've included, including our corporate communication from General Headquarters. But if you have any questions to any of those, you'll see back to school reminders, a few of our provincial initiatives for road safety. There's a significant cannabis joint forces that came out from corporate OPP. And I'm sure you've seen a few of those from our local detachment areas around the Hastings that we've taken down over the last month or so. And
That's
our
right.
officers are Community Street Crime Unit officers. It's a unit of 8 led by Sergeant Rick Dupuis, and we share that unit between our detachment and Peterborough. And they're primarily involved in property crime and drugs, where we know that very high, if not all, property crime is somehow linked to drug use. And we're in the middle or tail end of harvest season, which makes them exceptionally busy, also because of the size and scale of these operations. It's identified early of what threat level to officer safety it is. So quite often, well, I know for the one in particular outside of Hastings, there was 32 officers involved with that. So we bring in those resources from outside the area. We use an additional 2 or 3 Community Street Crime Unit members, and our team does the same. For instance, last week there was a large scale search warrant on an illicit cannabis grow in the CKL area. And our team went up there to help, and a lot of plant picking, a lot of work gloves, and hard work when you're talking thousands of plants.
I guess.
So if there's no questions on our initiatives during that time or our media releases, I'll move on. I will say, just under some current events for the board, our detachment's welcoming 4 new probationary constables in October. And that's pretty exciting to me and to our detachment. One way I like to measure success of a detachment, and if you have an attractive workplace, is for the OPP, we have what's called lateral lists. So through our human resources out of headquarters, an officer anywhere in the province can put their name on the lateral list, and basically it's numbered, obviously, and that's the only way it works. And they can lateral to any detachment in the province. So for the last 4 years, our lateral list, and they're specific for Brighton, Cobourg, and Campbellford, has been very active. And I think that speaks to that we have something good going on here, and people like working out of Newfoundland. So because of that, having that active lateral list, we haven't had any rookies come in. So because we're now topping up on vacancies and we're filling some spots we weren't able to before. We have 5 in total, actually, 5 probationary constables coming in, 4 in the October class, so middle of October, and then one of our own from the area, Graydon Maynard. He's been on our auxiliary unit for 2 years, and his family's from Brighton. He's in school right now, and he's going to be reporting for duty in early January. And you'll be happy to know 3 of those 5 officers will be reporting to and working out of Campbellford Detachment.
Very good.
A little update on new officers coming in. Move on to our statistics here.
And Jeff, perhaps when the new officers do come on board, we can meet them once we get actually meeting again.
I think I agree. I always like to bring the new officers, whether they're experienced officers lateraling in, and especially when they maybe haven't been part of municipal contract detachment areas before, and maybe don't know what the role of PSBs are. So I absolutely support that. Might not be till spring, who knows, but we'll certainly do that. So hopefully I'm in order with the report that you're looking at. My next page is the motor vehicle collisions. It's the template for the county. Does that seem right
What
for everybody?
page is that? Sorry, Jeff, what page?
Well, right after the initiatives, sorry, these aren't numbered for me.
Oh,
It's,
sorry, the motor vehicle collision by type?
it looks like this right there. There should be 3 of them for every month.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry if that's out of order on your side.
No, that's fine. I've got it.
Now, this is our report countywide. So you'll see each municipality, Alderville, First Nations community on there, as well as 401. So you can see in June that Trent Hills had a nice low number of only 5 collisions in June, resulting in one of those involved injuries where 1 person was injured and the rest of them were property damage. So that brought the year-to-date total of collisions in Trent Hills to 68. Next page is the same template for July. 9 motor vehicle collisions. You'll start to see those numbers start to creep up as we have through the pandemic, as people started moving more, getting deeper into the summer, of course, summer traffic as well. More cars moving, more traffic moving always results in more collisions. So for July, 9 in total, one of which 1 person was injured and the remainder were property damage only, and that brought the year-to-date to 78. And then the August template for that, 14 total for August. 3 involved personal injury and 11 were property damage, and that brought the year-to-date to 93.
Question on these motor vehicle accidents. Is it failing to stop or failing to yield? Is there any common theme in these collisions?
Yeah, the causal factors countywide and for the most part, almost province-wide, is speed too fast for conditions. That's more so on in the wintry months. People just going too fast in slippery conditions. Fail to yield does factor in. It's more so in the built-up areas, turning left in front of somebody when they think they have time. But speeding and drive too fast are the number 2 causal factors. So my next page is the statistic part. So hopefully that's what you're looking at. And again, motor vehicle collisions, you'll see in the table, this is countywide, mind you. So 192 collisions from June to August countywide. And compared to that same period of time last year, it's significantly lower, but we expected that with the pandemic as well. So it's about a 22% decrease. My next page of the report is violent crime. So you'll see for the June to August, 1 sexual assault, which is much lower for the same time of last year, which was 4. Assaults were just a little bit higher at 9 compared to 7. And other criminal code violations against a person that falls under the violent crime was 4 compared to 6. So you'll see that there was a decrease from 14 from 18 from the same time last year. That's something we haven't seen a decrease in. In fact, overall, the social calls that we're getting, where our traffic in the first 2 months of the onset of COVID dropped off significantly. Our social calls for service, so because everyone's at that time, especially everyone's home, anxiety, stress from the situation. So our domestics, our landlord-tenant act, neighbor disputes, anything where it involves people getting along or not getting along was increased in that way. Property crime stats are next, and also a decrease from this time last year. No arsons. We had 7 break-and-enters compared to 13 last year. We had 3 theft over 5,000 compared to 6, 10 theft under 5,000 compared to 16. We had 1 possession of stolen property, 10 frauds, up a bit from 7, and 21 mischiefs compared to 27. So overall, 52 property crime compared to 70 last year. And then drug crime, 2 charges total. And some our UCRs or our stats, they take a couple months to catch up sometimes. So you'll see the reflection on significant charges out of those 2 search warrant executions in the next 2 or 3 months. And then next is our clearance rate page. So our violent crime is always much higher than property crime. And in this case, violent crime clearance was 50, property crimes lower at 9.6. Our property crime clearance usually comes in between 20 and 30%, just depending on what's going on and what we're investigating. If it's, say, a graffiti or something like that, and we have we find a suspect and are able to lay charges, you'll see that clearance rate impacted significantly, because we could be clearing 7 or 8 calls for service in one whack. But in this case, property crime's a very difficult one to solve, because usually it's one person acting alone. They certainly don't do it when the police are around or there's a risk of it. But what is helping us is with the more people are getting the Wi-Fi cameras, both at home and at business. So that's helping a little bit as well. And we hope that'll continue. Next page are matters of interest. So I won't go through all that, of course, because there's quite a bit involved there for the 3 months. I will touch on, so number of calls for service in Trent Hills in June was 439. And then I'm tracking the EMCPA, or basically COVID non-compliance calls for service, and we had 30 in June. And if you have any questions at all about the matters of interest, just please let me know. But I'll skip ahead to the end of that section of matters of interest where it says Northumberland County-wide. And there's our rides. So 43 ride checks for the month of June. And we're getting our numbers back up in ride now, along with our vehicle stops. And along with that comes our provincial offense notices. Our officers are, the onset of COVID, obviously we weren't too concerned with ride. We didn't want our officers not knowing exactly what we were dealing with, poking their head in windows and getting close. And that's also reflected in our vehicle stops and our tickets as well. But with the use of PPE and further training and further reminders, you'll see that those numbers in what we usually do, our core services, ride and vehicle stops, start creeping up. And then 911 calls, drop calls 24 for the month of June. And if I had a comparison to last year, probably last year in June was well over 100 or 150, but the policy changed in January of this year, which was a welcome change. Next is the matters of interest for July. 437 calls for service in July, 7 Emergency Management Civil Protection Act calls for service. Skip to the rides. We had 43 ride initiatives July, and we had 24 drop 911 calls. And for August, 429 calls for service and 15 COVID compliance calls. Also, under the COVID compliance calls, sometimes we're asked, not too much, but we certainly get a few every month under the Quarantine Act. So Public Health federally will reach out to the police service of a particular jurisdiction. So if you have travelers coming back from out of country, they're obviously given very strict restrictions and instructions on 14-day isolation. So from time to time, they don't tell us why. They may have a suspicion, or but they ask us through our emergency provincial operations center in Orillia, and that information gets filtered down to us. An officer will do a compliance check. And what we do locally is just to protect our own members. We'll attend the residence. If we have a phone number, we'll call ahead and let them know we're coming and give them our instructions. We don't want interaction, but we just ask that they have a driver's license or some form of photo ID in hand, and either through a door window or the front bay window of some type. So there's no direct interaction, and we just verify that they are at home isolating like they should. And skipping to the end of that section, let's see, we didn't have any rides during August. That would be reflected in, it was a busy August county-wide, and July and August are, like most organizations, most popular time for annual leave. So we're always a little bit lower in officers during that time as well. And 48 911 calls, drop 911 calls. My next page is the Provincial Offense Act charges per month.
Yep.
So for June, 33 tickets issued within Trent Hills. Next page is July, 46 tickets issued. And for August, 60. On to the false alarm reports. For June, we had 9 alarms, in which case officers attended 7 of the locations. The other 2, they would have been canceled on the way. For July, 7 alarms, 3 locations were attended. And for August, 7 alarms and 6 locations attended. And usually at the end of our report, we have an auxiliary report as well. Our auxiliary, since the onset of COVID, has been stood down until further notice. They are coming back slowly. They're in phase 2. They are allowed back in our office because we even restricted our own members out of the office to keep everyone safe. And but at this point, they're not provincial level allowed to ride out with our regular service officers at this time. So because they don't have any initiatives going on, we don't have the report of what service they do on a monthly basis.
If I could ask a quick question here, going back to the calls, can you elaborate a little bit on the hospital and some of the successes that we've come across?
Yeah, absolutely. So last year, we identified that there was a significant increase. Back in early 2018, we signed an MOU of understanding between Campbellford Memorial Hospital and our detachment. And that was a mental health transfer of care memorandum, basically setting out roles and responsibilities of each organization. From our perspective, ensuring that our customer, in this case, the community member who needs that mental health support, is getting exactly what they need, that they're not in police care or custody for any longer than they need to be. Obviously, that's not where they're getting the support that they need. So that was signed with both hospitals, NHH and Campbellford. Identified a bit of a trend of calls for service that were much higher than we wanted to be there. Using some analytics, able to identify that the top 3 were unfounded 911 calls to the hospital, violent and disruptive mental health patients, and then mental health patients that were being treated at the hospital but were walking away without permission. So that really was obvious drain on our resources, and all of those top 3 calls for service are 2 officer response calls too. So if you have 2 officers working in the town of Campbellford at the time, they could be tied up for great lengths of time at the hospital, where alternatively they could be elsewhere in the community, proactive patrol. So with the help of Eric, that was last year. Now we set up a meeting with the president of the hospital, which was very, very positive, and introduced what our findings were. He was very supportive. I won't go into, there's quite a few areas that we discussed, including their overall security plan for their own safety of their own employees, as well as the security company that they go with as well. So that was all beefed up. We're really happy with the results. We offered our integrated CIT training that's offered it's a partnership between the OPP and Northumberland Mental Health. Jen Cox and Nancy Wagner delivered that to emergency department staff and managers as well. I sent our NCO sergeants to be part of that mandatory training as well. So that was helpful because our managers could meet some of their managers instead of it being 2 o'clock in the morning and not knowing each other. They had a little bit of time to build some relationships. So as a result, those calls almost dropped off immediately. The 911 calls itself, I think 75–80% of those were attributed to an old fax machine that was dialing out 911. So that was an easy fix. And then there were some patients, elderly patients that were being cared for at the hospital suffering from dementia issues. That was another issue with the 911 as well, that they were, again, dementia, not knowing where they were and calling 911. So the access to the phone was taken care of through the hospital as well. So as a result, we're there much less. The security certainly was beefed up, and and we went over the MOU as well. So it's a reminder, as they have a turnover in their staff and directors as well, it's important that they know what the new members, when they come on, of what the roles and responsibilities are. And yeah, overall, Eric, we're there much less, and we're where we're supposed to be more often, in the community rather than in the hospital. And the folks that need the help and are suffering are getting the help they need. Also, that was another part of it as well, the discharge plan. We weren't seeing a lot of that being used when the patients were being released. We saw a lot of calls for service where we were getting involved or being called almost immediately, and we don't like to see that either. And so their discharge plans have really been propped up as well to make sure that those mental health resources in the area within the Northumberland are really fully supporting that person. And we're getting called less for that as well, because when we're getting called, something's happened and they weren't being supported maybe as much as they could be.
Thanks, Jeff. And being a member of the PFAC for the Campbellford Hospital, I'll have to say that there was discussion amongst us PFAC members, and even the staff feel a lot better. So thank you so much for your quick action. It's just a win-win all the way around. Just a little communication. It works great. Community policing at its best. And I think it's it's a good point for the police board and our interactions. So let's chalk one up for police board and our interactions. So again, thank you very much.
Very welcome. I completely agree. It's all about the communication. Everyone has the best interest of everyone else and the patient. So that's really all it was. It was a little bit of build-up work, but just meeting new people and coming up with plans. So happy to do it. So I'll move on from there. My last piece in my report is our, looks like that. It's the property crime quarterly analysis that we provide all the boards. Hopefully you have that in front of you. So these are prepared by our regional analyst, Nalia. And for this one, it shows property crime over the last 3 years. So quite an easy read. You can see that there's an overall trend if you look at the graph, the line graph from 2017 to 20 and into Q2 of this year of 2020, there's been a bit of a decrease in that. That hasn't been the case in all areas. It's partially, I believe, due to the pandemic, there has been a decrease in some areas for property crime. But you could have one person spray painting cars, and that each of those cars could be called in individually. So that sometimes skews those calls for service. And then we have a similar report for the drug-related occurrences for the last 3 years as well. So you'll see by your line graph a spike in Q1. I can talk a little bit about that. There was a project going on in and around the Hastings area, so I know a good part of those 8 charges were connected to that as far as drug trafficking. But again, overall, you see that it's quite a downward line, which we like to see. Undoubtedly, you'll see a bit of a spike due to the charges connected to the search warrants for Trent Hills in the next quarter. Pending any questions, Chair, that's my report.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions?
Yes, Kathy,
Yes.
I'm interested in the grow ops that were dismantled. And I understand there's a difference between the grow ops that are in greenhouses and the ones that are out in open fields. Can the greenhouses produce again in the winter season? He spoke of the harvesting now of the end of the harvest season, but can we start a new season inside? I was interested when I saw the TV footage of them loading the plants with the equipment, with dump trucks. So
Yeah.
what becomes of that product? Did it get destroyed? And just issues that pertain to that, because I keep hearing that there's some more opportunities to have another execution, but maybe it's down the road a ways yet.
Jeff, can you speak to that, please?
Yeah, certainly. So it's everywhere right now. This is certainly not a Northumberland issue. It's all across the province. And Canada prominently. Ontario, BC, and Quebec are the provinces, but unfortunately Ontario is leading the way. There's approximately 220 grows that are known to the OPP. Provincially, the OPP leads a joint forces group that dismantles these. I spoke of earlier our community street crime unit, so they do locally the intelligence gathering, the investigations. I'll go back a little bit as well. So I speak to our mayors and CEOs and different municipal staff members quite often weekly. And what I always message them is when their staff are out for compliance checks or property standards, anything bylaw, when they see, because they have a lot more access to these different properties because of their own authorities than the police generally do. So I really encourage them to contact us, whether they think it's a legal grow or not. We can now, there's a 24/7 hotline basically for Health Canada that was developed about 6 months ago, which is a very good thing because it used to take up to 2 to 3 weeks for Health Canada to get back to us to let us know if a particular property, one, had licenses, so are they legally able to grow, and exactly how many cannabis plants that they're allowed to grow. Now it's about a 2 or 3 hour turnaround, which is much better for us. I try to get back to the municipality the day of so that they can move on and deal with that. So I really try to encourage them, don't think you're bothering us. It's not a lot of work for us to check in with Health Canada on those. Basically, we get involved in two of the situations. So and I'll use that example. A property comes in, say from some Warkworth. We call Health Canada. They'll either tell us that no, they are not a licensed registrant. And they're very careful too, because we're dealing with medical private information as well. So from the police side, I can't even share that information with our municipal partners. I can't even tell them that it's a medical license. So those that I've worked with over the last couple of years, they know my response, and my response would be the OPP has no particular interest in this address at this time. And from that, usually they can tell that we're dealing with either a licensed facility that has the proper number of plants. But that's a tricky one as well. There's so many law enforcement challenges through this whole mess, and it really is with the Health Canada. If you can have up to 2 authorized registrant growers on one piece of property, and each one of those growers are allowed to have 4 license holders for medical consumption because of a medical issue. And of course, every one of those people, they have got a script from a physician at some point within that year, allowing them to consume a certain amount of grams per year and how many plants that equals to. That's another area too. I don't want to go too deep into it because I could probably talk about it for half an hour, but that's a problem as well. Health Canada's their theory of how the yield of the plant, of how many grams comes off a healthy plant, is far, far less than our OPP drug experts of truly how many grams. So when you're talking the average medical license holder can grow about 180 to 195 plants a year. That's a lot of plants. Nobody is consuming that amount of plants. They do factor in, like any other crop, you have your die rate and all things like that, but that yield issue certainly factors in it as well. Because of the formulas that they're using, and whenever there's a sliver of a window for the probability of a lot of cash being made, it attracts organized crime, of course, and that's what's happening. They stack licenses. You can have up to 4 medical licenses per address. And what we've seen, I haven't seen it in Trent Hills yet, but I know they've tried it in Crammy once, Almacolman twice. They'll take a property and then they'll subdivide the property with a municipality into, say, 181 Heron Road A, 181 Heron Road B. So now they're legally doubling their plants, doubling their users. In talking with my colleagues across the province and those that are their full-time job is in the dealings of dismantling these, they have a lot of talks with Health Canada. it's promising. Health Canada has been making some progression over the last 2 or 3 months, and I think that is fully connected to the voice of the municipalities. The municipalities, Trent Hills is doing terrific work, and they're quite often contacting Carmen DeBoer, one of our detective constables, on these different grows and getting back to them whether they're legal or not. So that aligned voice of the municipalities up through their MPs, MPPs is making a difference. Health Canada now is starting to revoke licenses. That was a real problem before. We would go in, shut down a property, and because of the available cash to these people that are running this, they can have it up and going the next day. They'll go slap down $40,000 for generators and equipment, and Health Canada wasn't revoking their license, even though we've laid those charges. So they're starting to do that a little bit more as a result of the Ontario Fire Marshal coming in when it's an electrical compliance issue. And that's the route that a couple of our municipalities are moving. Brighton's doing a lot of work. I know Trenton Hills as well is looking at bylaws that have to do with occupational standards, property compliance. Because that's the way to do it right now, because we just don't have the proper regulation through Health Canada. I believe it's coming, but it's going to take some time. Federal government's hearing it from all sides, so there is some movement there. Right now, I believe the way to go is through that bylaw. We'll, of course, support our bylaw officers and support staff. And I tell them, don't go to any of these properties without calling us first. We'll go with you, as we would for any shady bylaw investigation where there could be a risk to staff. Almost all of these are somehow have organized crime involved. And depending on the property, it could involve street gang organized crime. It could involve outlaw biker organized crime, or different groups. And then they have all the growers out there. The one in Hastings, there were 19 individuals arrested or detained. And so you had your growers. There's aspects of labor trafficking going on here as well. So we notify and bring in the CBSA for that part as well. Look at different immigration issues. That's their category. But I guess overall, without taking up more of your time, it is a complex issue. But I really think in the last 6 months, things are looking up, and I think that's because all the organizations are now working together. And there is that we really needed that traction with Health Canada to start looking at these licenses. And the ability for someone to Skype with with a doctor right now, Skype with a lawyer too, maybe, but, and get that prescription immediately through Skype. It's just too easy. And there they go. There's your 180 plants for the year. I could tell you that when we look into some of these licenses, once the investigation, and it's a lot of work going into it, we have knowledge of a property. It might be 2 months before we can actually act on it for the proper setup, the intel, get all of our ducks in a row for the investigative portion of it. We found some license holders are deceased. There was one who lived in Europe for the past 3 years. So there's all sorts of tricks going on there. So right now, it's a capacity issue for us, not just the OPP, but all the police jurisdictions. There's just so many of these. They take over agricultural properties, as you know. They use that existing infrastructure of the farm with the outbuildings, irrigation, all sorts of things. And to the bigger operations, money's not a problem at all. So they take over these areas. There's issues of wastewater contaminant, the pesticides that are going into the groundwater. And that's just in the rural areas. But I know in Brighton, there's 2 or 3 grows right in the urban area as well. And when we check on them, I get it, it's frustrating, certainly from the police perspective, but from municipal governance perspective, very frustrating too. You can see it right in front of you. You're getting complaints from local community members of odor, all sorts of things, but we check on them. They may have 4 licenses up to 980 plants, let's say. They are completely legit, but we know that it's using a loophole, and most likely there's organized crime going on. Sorry, bit of a long-winded answer, but
oh, that's great. Is Health Canada not looking at reducing the number of plants per prescription?
I haven't heard that yet, Kathy. It's something we've pushed from the OPP and the both the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police and the Canadian Association. That's one of their top 5 that they're pushing. Proper background checks. What they call a background check is very different from what we call a background check. At
No
their
doubt.
level, you just need to affirm that you don't basically have a criminal background. That to me isn't nearly enough. And so no, that's a first for me, Kathy. I hadn't heard that they're looking at that, but hopefully that's part of it. It's the numbers that they provide are outlandish. Oh yeah, yeah. There's no,
Absolutely crazy.
and the 4
I had no
plants,
idea.
the 4 plants that we're all allowed to grow now, because of that's difficult as well, because we're all allowed as Canadian citizens to grow up to 4 marijuana plants on our residential property, whether it be outdoor or indoor. That again, it was a little disappointing to see that part from the law enforcement perspective, because anyone can grow it. Anyone that wants to make money, they're not growing 4, they're growing 40, and we have no inspection authorities, which is the way it should be. We can't knock on a door and just go in. They don't have to tell their municipality or anybody that they're growing plants. There is no anyone who truly needs cannabis for pain management or whatever they need it for. 4 plants isn't enough. What I've been told anyway, as far as the grams that one plant can produce. So we're hoping that they move to get away from all the medical grows, buy it through the legal process online with Ontario Cannabis, or buy it from a licensed, sanctioned grower, and that we can buy recreational use cannabis from, make that all one, and then that should take out or put a dent in that illicit source.
Yeah.
So the
Thank you
wheel's
very
turning slowly, but we're finally looking like there's some movement on it.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I think we've covered, we talked about the false alarms. Did we talk about the group home calls? Okay, I think right now then, I would like a motion to accept the OPP reports.
I'll move.
I'll move it.
Thanks, Ken.
Second.
Thanks, Eric. Thomas, would you call a vote, please?
Certainly. Councillor Tully,
Yes.
Councillor Bratney,
Yes.
Eric Cowell,
Yes.
Pierre Defoe.
Yes.
Motion carries by 4.
The next item we have are the Black Cat radar reports. I guess it's over to you, Jeff, please.
Yes, thank you. So I confirmed these 3 locations, and on my end, I have Banter Road, Percy Boom Road, and 11th Line West. And these are stretches that I think we've all seen before. These are the most recent Black Cats. That's the Trent Hills Black Cat. I assume everyone's familiar with that device and the amazing work that it does. I checked with our traffic sergeant, Mark Collins, and each municipality handles it a little bit differently as far as how proactive they are in getting the Black Cats out. Some municipalities will set it up for them, but all municipalities, they can either set it up themselves by their roads department, or will make that request because of complaints that we've received either through the public or PSB boards. So in these 3 cases, I confirmed with Mark that these were all set up by the municipality. One thing I will point out, if you're looking at a Banter Road report is the one that I have is the first. You'll see under the larger, the total percentage of enforceable violations. So that arrow graph, the second line down, you'll see enforcement tolerance of 10 kilometers per hour.
Yep.
And what we use, that skews things just a little bit. Whenever we set up the Black Cat, we always use, unless there's other mitigating factors involved, but we use a 15 kilometer per hour discretion, a tolerance. Only because if somebody's doing 60 kilometers into 50 kilometers per hour, always up to officer discretion and whatever the situation might be at the side of the road. But I can tell you in 27 years, I've never handed out a ticket for somebody who's been doing 60 and a 50. So we usually set our black cats for 15 over, and then we go from there. So in this case, I think Neil, it looks like Neil was the one that was setting up the black cats. He used the 10 over. So that does push up your needle a little bit in the enforceable violations part. So on Banter Road, we know that is an issue, and we've had officers for the last 2 months plus up in there writing tickets on that stretch. Dave Putner, who's Dave spent his career in Campbellford. Dave's a part-time officer now since he retired in March. Both Dave and Jeff Laporte finished 30 years of policing in March. They were going to take 2 months off and then consider coming back part-time because the OPP's had a part-time program for 2 years. And the sweethearts that they are, with COVID hitting, I think they retired. Their retirement was the quickest ever, 2 days, a weekend, and they came back immediately for us on Monday. So we're using, both gentlemen work 20 hours a week. And for the most part, we bring them back for traffic enforcement. The earlier onset of COVID, discussed with Dave and Jeff, and because of what we were in at the time, they were doing a lot of community work. So a lot of foot patrol in the areas, a lot of visibility, just to get that confidence out there, then, more police officers walking around, interacting with the public. Trying to get back to that enforcement part. So I know Dave's up there in all of these areas, and he's been writing a fair amount of tickets, especially on the 11th line west. Let's see. So the next is Percy Boom Road, and you'll see with even the 10-kilometer enforcement tolerance, it's very low in that green area. So that indicates to us that there is not a speeding issue in that area. It doesn't mean, because we deal with a lot of these countywide, of course, and especially if it's a local community member, we always make contact with the complainant in the case. We try to go right out and have a discussion, or Mark Collins makes a great tea. He often comes out and has a sit down, or depending on with COVID, end of the driveway talk. That also gives us the chance to explain to our members of the public a few different issues that come up, that a vehicle coming down the road, we hear it a lot, see, that guy's doing 90 kilometers an hour. And if Mark has a handheld radar with him, he can show, well, it's actually doing 62. But because of the engineering of the roadway, if the houses are closer to the road, a lot of things impact why it makes it look like a vehicle going quicker than it really is. So that sometimes helps. I would estimate probably about 80%, 85% of the traffic complaints on speeding that we do receive through our Black Cat studies or officer interaction, like Mark going out, about 85% of them are determined that they aren't a speeding issue. But we do that community interaction every time, so that the complainants feel that they're heard. They enjoy an uniform officer coming out and spending that time with them. And then we track each one of those as well. So we've been tracking our speeding complaints, and it really is daily. We know countywide, there are the hot spots that we will never be able to correct. We know we have Mark calls it the Black Cat top 20. So that's in the general constable's area of all three of our detachments. So as officers are receiving their shift briefing at the beginning of their shift, they can take a copy with them. A lot of them take a picture of it and have it with them on the phone. So when they do have free time in patrol area, they can go to the Black Cat top 20 hotspots and do some speeding enforcement. So we know that there are some areas that we could be there 24/7, and maybe because of the engineering of the road. I think of Telephone Road through Cramie and Alma-Colvin, really some roller coaster spots there. Some areas 60, some 80, and we could sit there all day. People that are using it like a roller coaster and write tickets. But so even if that arrow is low in the green that you see on Percy Boom Road, we don't forget about it, because maybe for different factors, it continues to be an issue to community members. So just because it's really not a speed issue to us, we know the community impact is there. So that never comes off our list. And 11th line west, that is a problem and continues to be a problem. A lot of enforcement and a lot of paper being handed out throughout the summer months on both east and west on 11th line. That 10 kilometer per hour tolerance, I would say that move that up to a 15, it's going to come down a bit into the amber yellow area. But obviously that's still a speeding concern. So we'll continue to be monitoring that area. Mark has suggested, that's part of all of our speed surveys too, is that we consult with the municipality, and Mark has a great relationship with all the roads supervisors throughout the county. And signage is always one of our top recommendations, and that for us to enforce a speed limit in any area, there needs to be proper reasonable signage. And under the MTO, I believe it's book 7, it's very particular of how many, I think it's 800 meters, maybe 600 meters. There must be a black and white regulatory sign of that speed. So if we're challenged in court, we can provide that. So quite often the sign recommendations are made to the municipality. We have to consider being fair to the public as well. And that's something that Neil and I, Warren and I spoke about in the past as well, because of the Trent Hills bylaw of any area in the rural area that's not signed, that it should be considered a 50 kilometer per hour zone. Port Hope has that as well. And which is fair, but I think there has to be also that reasonableness. If it's somebody maybe from out of the area that come in for what route that they took to come in, maybe they missed that sign. And the municipality's done a really good job in putting up those large signs and as many entries possible to the township. But we think there's that reasonable factor as well. So we have suggested further signage be posted on the 11th line, and that helps us a little bit in our officers when it comes to court time. So that's my update on that, Chair. We're going to continue to be up there on the 11th and hopefully change some driving behavior through our continued enforcement.
Thank you very much. Thomas, do I need a motion to accept these reports as well?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, you do.
So moved.
Thank you, Eric.
I'll second.
Thank you, Jean.
Is this the time we could ask for further blacktop applications?
Possibly under general business, Jean. Thomas?
Okay.
Thomas, could you please call the vote?
Certainly. Eric Cowell,
Yes.
Councillor Tully,
Yes.
Councillor Bratney,
Yes.
Chair Defoe.
Yes.
Motion carries by 4.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is general business. And the first item listed there is speeding concerns in Campbellford. And I had asked Thomas to put that on the agenda because of a lot of chatter that I saw on Facebook from community members here in mainly, I believe that particular day, it was Campbellford. There was issues around Front Street, Queen Street, and Highway 30 South. I'm sure, Jeff, these areas are probably already on the Black Cat Top 20.
Sorry about that. All 3 are.
Yes.
Highway 30 especially.
Okay. Jean, did you want to speak to this?
Yes, we've been made aware of the community zone in Hastings around the public school, and that is a 40 kilometer zone now, but they don't seem to be behaving very well. But on the 10th line west of 30, I think this is the same crowd that's speeding from Hastings and then on to the 11th and going to Crow River. And I think if we could monitor the 10th concession, we would slow things up here as well. There are sections on it that are just like a speedway. It's a well-maintained road now, so it's open season. But the real concern in the village of Hastings about that public school, that seems to be a lot of people cresting over that hill way too fast.
I could comment on that, Chair, if you like.
Yes, please.
So yeah, we're working with that. Certainly the school area is important to us. We're waiting on the Trent Hills Black Cat right now. It's deployed somewhere else within the municipality. So Neil he's going to set that up as soon as it's brought down and downloaded. Dave Putner's been doing a lot of work up there, especially the fact that it's a community safety zone and a school zone. And I know he's met several people and handed out some paper that they probably didn't want to receive. So that's going to continue on every September with school returning. I make it a standing order within the detachment that every school zone is patrolled in the morning, either on foot or in high visibility, just to get people thinking again, because it's especially in this case with school being out for so long, get people thinking again of slowing down. Kids are out, look for the chrome orange school buses, changing that behavior and slowing it down. So just that visibility alone, but we've made this one a priority in Trent Hills because of the school and the complaints that we're receiving. Spoke to Scott Reynolds from the county as well, because I understand that's considered a county road going in through there. And we let him know that there was a bit of a delay on the Trent Hills Black Cat. And he said if we find that any further, the county has 2 Black Cats that they use as well, that he'll try his best to free up that, just so we know the real high points of the day when the speeders are going through there. So I think of that we're getting there. And Dave and Jeff Laporte, they're up there quite often, as well as Mark Collins. That's probably top 5 on our Black Cat list right now, because it's that school area. And we've received complaints in a few different ways, both through community, through the municipality, and now through the board. So that's obviously telling us that it's a priority.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Chair,
Yes.
can I bring up a complaint about ATVs received on the weekend on Doxy Street North in Campbellford with excessive speed and modified exhaust systems?
Yes.
I just realized
It
I don't
falls
think
under, I believe it falls under the speeding concerns in Campbellford. So
all righty. Just trying to wake up my phone here. Yeah, apparently they're Doxy Street North in the last few days. There's been open mufflers and doing excessive speeding, and I guess that's where Doxy Street runs, maybe into Front Street, if that's considered Doxy Street North. So I think the mayor and I received a complaint on the weekend. I think Thomas, you were forwarded a copy of that. So I just wondered if that could be added to surveillance in the Campbellford area.
I can speak to that, Chair.
yes, thank you.
Ken, would it be possible, or Thomas, could that email be forwarded to me? Sometimes we'd like to speak to the complainant just to see if we have can get further detail, time of day. ATVs are tough, they really are, and the dirt bikes. I know just last night I took a unmarked cruiser home because I started my day in Brighton this morning, and I live just basically close to the border of Alma-Calderman and Crammy. And I had an ATV and a dirt bike pass me on the side road that I lived down, and turned around. They knew what I was right away, and they were gone. Of course, they know the area and what farmers field to go through and all. I thought I could catch them coming out the other way, but they outsmarted me this time. But that's really the tough part. Better for us, not better for the community, but as far as identifying the suspects, better for us in an urban setup like this is, because more than likely get talking to people are going to know who these guys are if this has been an ongoing issue on Doxy. Ken, can I also ask, is it ATVs only, or are there dirt bikes in there as well?
I'm just reading it through. just says on the street, it doesn't say, it talks about the ATV bylaw, so I'm assuming it's ATVs, but it didn't specifically say bikes or ATVs, so.
Okay.
But I think, Thomas, we can send that off to Jeff.
Ken, can you forward me that email and then I'll forward it off to Jeff?
Alrighty.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, while we're on that topic, yesterday when I was driving the school bus in the afternoon westbound on the bridge, there's a gentleman on a dirt bike going eastbound on the sidewalk with pedestrians and just bailing right along. I blew the horn at him and he gave me the finger. I don't know what he thought I was, which one of us was wrong, but that's just weird things that could happen in Camelford, I guess. Add that to your diary.
That's ridiculous, actually. And reason I asked about the email from Ken's complaint there, we'd like to talk to the complainant. A lot of these dirt bikes or ATVs, they don't put a plate on it because that's a way to identify. But quite often we can identify the suspect through a particular helmet they're wearing, aftermarket parts. You said about open mufflers. A lot of them like to throw the fancy, expensive or no mufflers at all. And we can identify it through that. Any identifying marks on the machines so that we can track them down that way. In that case, Gene, truly was a dirt bike. It wasn't one of those electrical bicycle scooter things.
No.
Yeah, might be an expensive finger. We had a case in that was the end of spring in Alnwick Haldeman area, close to the trail system, but a resident who was basically fed up, heard an ATV coming, and she took about a 12-second video of a young fella, you could tell by the video, just screaming past. And she was out and he gave her the finger just as she was going by. So we were able to break that video down and identify him. And that's why one of the counselors was involved and knew the lady that we're talking about. Great lady as well to do that part. And I said that was probably about a $2,000 finger that he gave there. I don't know if it was worth it or not, but we were able to send that, stop the footage, and send it off to our general headquarters and get our forensic unit video analysis to, however they do it, pixelate it or bring up that resolution. And with all their tech and know-how, they were almost unable to do it. But we did get a plate. 21-year-old fellow who was visiting in the area using his dad's ATV and thought it was a free-for-all, which is, a lot of times it's the case. We have probably more so in the south than Trent Hills area, but a lot of ATVers coming in from GTA or built-up areas and think, well, I'm in the country now, I can ride and do whatever I want. So just a expensive finger example there that I'd throw out, and the fact that a lot of people were surprised that we would go to that length to solve that, an ATV on the road, but it's a problem and it affects people's enjoyment of life. So we have no issue in using the resources available to us.
Perfect, thank you. I guess at this point, Thomas, do I need a motion to accept the information that was presented?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, you would.
Okay, could I please have a motion?
Make that motion.
Thanks, Eric.
I'll second it.
Thanks, Ken. Thomas, could you call a vote, please?
Of course. Eric Cowell,
Yes.
Councillor Tully,
Yes.
Councillor Bratney,
Yes.
Pierre Defoe.
Yes.
Motion carries by 4.
The next item on the agenda is the 2020 Trent Hills Police Services budget. So has everyone had a chance to review the budget?
Yes.
Does anybody have any comments about it?
myself, no.
No? I think Jean and Ken would certainly have more knowledge about it than I have, being on council.
No, I think unless Thomas has any comments, I think everything looks in order.
Okay.
Through you, Madam Chair, just pointing out that all of the revenues and expenses are in line with the budgetary, except for the noted police miscellaneous expense. As noted by the treasurer, it looks like it's a one-time payment for services rendered between 2015 and 2018. Aside from that, we usually have expenses for things like mileage and training and courses, but due to COVID, there weren't any of those. So
No.
aside from that one expense, everything is consistent with what we'd expect in a given year.
Okay, thank you. Then could I have a motion, please, to accept the proposed budget?
So move.
Thank you, Jean.
I'll second.
Thanks, Ken. Thomas, could you please call the vote?
Councillor Bradney,
Yes.
Eric Cowell,
Yes.
Councillor Tully,
Yes.
Chair Defoe.
Yes.
Motion carries by 4.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is our work plan. We talked about this at our last meeting. Any comments on the work plan?
Yes, it's Eric.
Yeah,
As we discussed briefly before the meeting started, Kathy, I would
Yeah.
definitely like to see some achievables. For instance, ride-alongs. I
Yeah.
think that's very important. Right through to anything else that Jeff might think that would be not only of interest, but important for us to understand. The Aurelia trip, for me, was a huge eye-opener, especially looking at the budget and the shared resources. I would definitely like to keep that going. I see here PSB training to be determined. I would love to fill that up with low cost, even no cost items. And I'd like to see us work on that a little bit more.
I certainly think that would make sense. Ken, how do you feel about that?
I agree with that, and I just wanted to bring up Remembrance Day. Given the COVID situation, any idea what the Remembrance Day services will be held? And I'm thinking particularly in Hastings where the road is blocked off, or whether they will not be able to carry on in the usual format this year. So I don't know if anybody has any information on that.
I
haven't heard anything.
Now that the Legion is closed in Campbellford, that'll be interesting.
From the OPP side, I wouldn't be surprised if we hear something from our headquarters as far as expectation. As you know, we're heavily involved in Remembrance Day. Our entire auxiliary unit is out. The fact that they're stood down will severely limit our ability to participate this year. But I imagine through community services, we'll be getting some type of direction corporately.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I think that I'd like to suggest that if any of the board has ideas on ways we can become more involved, that they share them with the rest of us, and we'll try to do what we can in light of COVID. But yeah, I'd like to see us get a little bit more involved as well.
Madam Chair, could I comment on the ride along?
Yes.
I think, Eric, just to, I really support ride-alongs. I've taken out, even when I was up north, jeepers, 18, 17 years ago, I was taking out PSB members at that time. I think it's really important. So that's a standing open invitation for everybody. And of course, outside COVID, we wouldn't be able to do it right now. But I think that offers a really strong perspective from board members just to see, and I think it give you a better understanding of, well, when you hear these reports from me or another detached commander, you can really put it together when you've been riding with an officer for a few hours and maybe involved in a call or two, and maybe going after an ATV or a dirt biker, and just see what they're up against day in, day out. So that's something that's is always open for all board members.
Thank you very much. And I'm sure that once we get through COVID, members will take you up on your offer.
Terrific.
Any other comments on the work plan?
Through you quickly, Madam Chair, due to the comments received by the board regarding training and ride-along opportunities, we'll amend the motion to accept the work plan as amended to include some of the training that has been discussed pertaining to ride-alongs post-COVID, that sort of thing, so it's reflected in the minutes.
Perfect, thank you. Can I please have a motion then to accept the 2020 work plan as amended based on today's conversation?
Honored to. Madam Chair.
Yes, thank you. Can I have a seconder?
I will second it. I thought Gene was going to do it, but he,
Thank you. Thomas, could you call the vote, please?
Of course. Eric Cowell,
Yes.
Councillor Tully,
yes.
Councillor Bratney,
Yes.
Chair Defoe.
Yes.
Motion carries by 4.
Next item on the agenda is communications, and there is nothing listed. So I guess that we haven't received anything since our last meeting. Next meeting has been scheduled for October 27th, 2020 at 10 a.m. And I'm assuming that we will be notified whether it will be Zoom or in person prior to the date.
That's correct, yes. Once we know a little bit more information on whether we'll meet in person or whether we will be doing the electronic participation, we'll be letting board members know.
Okay, thank you. Well, I guess that's it for today. Could I please have a motion to adjourn?
Moved.
Thank you, Eric.
Welcome.
You require a seconder?
I do. Thanks, Jane. Thomas, could you please call the vote?
Of course. Eric Cowell,
Yes.
Councillor Tully,
Yes.
Councillor Bratney,
Yes.
Chair Defoe.
Yes.
Motion carried by 4. We are adjourned. It is 11:13 a.m.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
See y'all in
Well
October.
done, Kathy.